Tonight,
Trinidad feels like home.
an interview with the Jamaican High Commissioner.
Where is the bilateral relations at this moment between both countries?
From currency to Caricom.
What would you like to see, or what do you think is absolutely necessary to get this community to be more of a community?
Trust.
Now, on CNC3, High Commissioner Natalie Campbell-Rodriques.
High Commissioner Natalie Campbell-Rodriques, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
You've been in this position for a few months now. Actually, it's just been 1 month, so you're very fairly new to it. What have you made of your first month as High Commissioner of Jamaica here in Trinidad and Tobago?
So, first of all, today actually marks exactly a month since I arrived in Trinidad and came to office, and 2 days short of when I presented my credentials to the President. Trinidad feels like home. I know I'm definitely in the Caribbean. I'm not far from Jamaica, and it feels good because our behaviors are similar. The topography is very similar in my mind, so it feels like home.
You have some pretty big shoes to fill. Mr. Arthur Williams, who you replaced, he was a very popular guy within the media, within the diplomatic circles of Trinidad and Tobago. Very likable character as well, a lot of personality, so you have some pretty big shoes to fill.
You know what is the funny thing? So years ago, myself and him worked together before. So I know how big those shoes are, and I'm going to do my best to keep up.
What is your mission as High Commissioner in Trinidad and Tobago?
That's an interesting question. My mission here in Trinidad and Tobago is to ensure that the work of Jamaica gets done. That's first and foremost. And by that I mean our diaspora feels comfortable and that they have the High Commission as a place they can turn to, not just when their passports need to be renewed, but with whatever other services they may need that can be done by the High Commission. And also just to increase the visibility of Jamaica, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in all the countries that we cover throughout the region. And we do cover most of the English-speaking Caribbean, not Belize and Bahamas, and we do provide consul service to the colonies, the Dutch colonies, etc.
It's interesting that you should say you feel at home, because I don't think it's a cliche, given that the Jamaican influence in Trinidad and Tobago is a very real influence. And it's more than just a diaspora, and I want to talk about the diaspora a little bit, but first, the music, not least, is very prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago. The flag is very prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'd go as far as saying the brand of Jamaica is very prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago. So Jamaicans here, like yourself, have every reason to feel somewhat at home.
Yes, we do. And, you know, I just want to add on to what you said. Our brand isn't just visible in Trinidad and Tobago. It's one of the most recognizable brands throughout the world. Everybody knows Jamaica, or knows someone from Jamaica, or knows something about Jamaica, whether it's through YouTube, TikTok. Social media has helped that significantly. So Jamaicans, we feel so large and in charge wherever we go.
It's an interesting word to use, large. What do you think is the key to having such an influence of a small island nation, like most across the Caribbean region, but to have such reach?
A large part of it has to do with the fact that Jamaicans have been raised to believe there's nothing we can't do. We absolutely believe as a people that we are great. And when we start at that point, we do absolutely everything good after that. Now, when you think about it, when you think of the Bob Marleys, there's hardly any other musician who has done what Bob Marley's music has done globally. When you look at Usain Bolt, earlier before this interview, we were talking about Oliver, one of our comedians, actors. So Jamaica is just so big. And when we perform on the global stage, in whatever sector it is, we do it at such a level as though we're not a tiny little dot on the map.
One of the things that Jamaicans is praised for in Trinidad and Tobago is the level of patriotism the country has, whether it's through the diaspora or Jamaicans living in the homeland. Where are the ingredients coming from for that patriotism? Is it through school? Is it through nurturing?
It's coming through homes. It's coming through schools. For example, at the primary level, from you're 7 years old, you can enter a competition for your school to run athletics. We start at that level right through, and you're connected to the high school that you went to or the primary school that you went to. And at home, it is just, as I said to someone earlier today, being Jamaican is not something we can explain. It's an experience. It's a level of awesomeness like nothing else you can imagine. And this is how we are in Jamaica. And as Russell Peters, the Canadian comedian, has said, Jamaicans do not pretend to be anybody else. Other people pretend to be us. And it's that mentality that we carry with us wherever we go.
Let's talk a little bit about the diaspora now. How big is the diaspora of Jamaica in Trinidad and Tobago?
So we don't have the official figures, but we suspect it is somewhere about 12,000 persons who are here, who are Jamaicans or of Jamaican ancestry. So it's quite large.
What does Trinidad and Tobago offer to the Jamaican population here?
First of all, you have to understand that Jamaicans love to travel to what we call foreign. You know, we say foreign in Jamaica, which means outside our shores. And Jamaicans are always looking for opportunities. And with Caricom and with the relationship among Caribbean islands at the moment, Jamaicans feel that they can make a living here in Trinidad and Tobago, and as such, they have come. But also, there are persons who have come here for business or who have come here for work and have fallen in love. There seems to be really something magical between Jamaicans and Trinidadians, why there are so many marriages. And when a Jamaican woman, for example, moves here, she meets the love of her life and she marries him, they make Trinidad home. And all of those factors contribute to the number of Jamaicans being here.
But it's more than just marriages. The diplomatic relations between both countries have always been long-standing
Absolutely.
and very strong. There's been a special relationship between both countries for many decades. There's been a special rivalry in sports like cricket and football that is also deep-rooted. Where is the bilateral relations at this moment between both countries?
You are correct. For a very long time, our countries have been connected, but I think more so now with Prime Ministers Holness and Rowley, the relationship has deepened even more. And so you have even better relationships than you had before between the two countries. And I think a large part of it has to do with being two of the bigger economies in the region. And also, Trinidad is the country in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. We are the countries with our own music. That brings us together somehow. We have managed to do something globally that many countries in the world have not done. And also, when you look on it, we're the two real party countries, and you'd be surprised. Partying, sports, and food has a way of drawing us together, but not to take away from the work that diplomacy has done as well, to bring us closer together. I think our Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Kamina Johnson-Smith for Jamaica, and Dr. Brown, Amory Brown for Trinidad and Tobago, have also done a lot of work to ensure that the two countries continue to foster the relationships that have been carved out over the last 60 years.
Coming up, the Bank of Jamaica suspends the TT dollar, a response from the High Commissioner.
But there are challenges within both countries, as there always is, to continue to foster good relations between both countries. One of the challenges that popped up recently would have been the Jamaican banks deciding that it would no longer, exchange Trinidad and Tobago dollars. How have you managed to infiltrate that situation, and what are your thoughts on that situation, and how do we both countries rise above it?
Well, when I first saw the article, I was most concerned, and I said, what is Jamaica thinking at this moment? But further investigations have shown that the Bank of Jamaica has had to stop taking the TNT dollars because the Central Bank of TNT has said they won't take them from Jamaica anymore. So if we were to take TT dollars, we'd have nothing to do with them. So that is a situation where we would love to know from the government of Trinidad what is the situation why they're no longer taking the TT dollars that we would take from persons coming to Jamaica with them.
Have you initiated conversations with Dr. Brown?
No, not with Dr. Brown on that issue, but in Kingston we have started the conversation there because we have to do the research before we can approach a government about, that's a major decision, yes, that was taken.
And how concerning is it for you as High Commissioner?
It is concerning, but we have not yet seen where it has had any impact on the diaspora, which is our primary concern. We have kept our fingers on the pulse with it, and we will continue to keep our fingers on the pulse, and we're trying to get to a greater understanding as to why that decision was taken. But at the moment, we have not yet seen an impact on it.
As the link between both Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, I know that you have not initiated conversations with diplomats here in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you intend to?
Yes, we intend to have the conversations with the relevant persons when the time arises.
How far into the future do you see that this can be resolved?
It depends on how soon we have those meetings. And I'm not sure if it is something that is to be resolved because that assumes that there's a problem to be fixed. We're not sure it's a problem. Right now we're trying to understand why the decision was taken because sometimes decisions are taken and it's not because there's a problem, but because it's the right thing to do.
That's one of the challenges that both Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago faces, but there are other challenges that there are common concerns about in both countries, crime being one of them. The Caricom Crime Summit a little bit earlier this year, Prime Minister Andrew Holness, he attended and he was very vocal about the challenges that the region itself faces, in particular both Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. Do you feel that given the common concern of crime in both countries, that there is room there for both nations to, we have worked before, but do further work?
Absolutely. There's always room for partnership. Something as important as crime and as big and impactful as crime does need partnerships. And that is the reason the Jamaican government and that of your country, Trinidad and Tobago, are working together to see how we can partner. One of the things we have to realize about crime in the Caribbean, it is fostered a lot by gangs. It is fostered by transshipment points being set up through the region. We are surrounded by water. None of us can manage our borders the way we would like to. Look at Jamaica, we're in the middle of the ocean. Our borders are more porous than we would like them to do, and the country has bought ships, trained persons to work differently on the ports, etc. But once you have waters, as you do as well, it becomes a difficult task. And so working together will become that much more important. And that is the reason both our ministers of national security, as well as our leaders of our countries, are doing everything possible to work together with the other partners in the Caribbean as well, and with Caricom.
Do you feel that the Caricom Crime Summit was fruitful in the common messaging and the common agenda at which Caricom would like to move forward, especially when it comes to things that you just mentioned? Transshipment is a very, very important point.
There is always ways that, as a development specialist, I could look on and say, we could have done this differently. The summit could have done that differently. But in general, I do believe the summit was a success. Because what you saw happening was leaders who countries years ago that didn't have a crime problem had to come to the table now to talk about crime. Crime is no longer a Jamaica situation in the region. It is now a regional problem. And of course, that summit gave an opportunity for leaders to come to the table, speak to each other, speak about the issue in a way that was more than just their country, because we are a region and we need to start operating as such.
I'm glad that you mentioned that you're a developmental specialist, because Caricom marked 50 years as a body this year. And how would you describe Caricom half a century later? Have we developed in the way that we ought to have developed? And have we done the things that we ought to have done and gotten to the place that we ought to be at?
Can I rephrase your question a
Absolutely.
little bit? Is there room for further growth? Are there different ways in which Caricom could have impacted the region? I would say yes. In terms of how Caricom has operated thus far and what it has achieved, I would not have given them a failing grade. What I would have said is more have been done to help our individual countries. But one thing I've learned is that a shepherd's job is always hard. And that's why shepherds have sheepdogs, because on their own they can't herd the cattle very well. It's very hard to ask individual nation states in a region such as ours, where we're not even joined by a fence. We're separated by water. We're separated by so much that is different, to operate in a way, for example, like the EU would. So I won't be too harsh on Caricom, but I will say we could have done more.
My question is not to be harsh on Caricom, as opposed to you are a developmental specialist, and going into the next 50 years, what would you like to see, or what do you think is absolutely necessary to get this community to be more of a community?
Trust. That's the word, trust. Because unless each nation trusts the other, we won't. Caricom or no one can make it happen better than it is now. What we need is trust.
When you say trust, do you feel that at the moment nations are still a little bit too nationalistic, a little bit too territorial about their own small islands, as opposed to a more regional, thrusting themselves into a more regional integrative approach?
To some extent, but is that not human? The question to be asked is whether a Caricom format is the best thing for the region right now. That's where we should be asking.
Can I ask you that question then?
You can. And what I'll say to you is I need to spend some more time doing some research to reach a firm place in my mind. Because when you look at how the model has worked in other places in the world, some of them are backing away from that. Brexit raised a big question mark about that model. And so we as a region have to now be honest with ourselves and ask the question, what is the best model for us moving together? Are Jamaicans comfortable seeing our athletes running in blue and white? Is Trinidad comfortable? Do we take our integration further, deeper? Do we leave it as it is? What is the best way forward? That's the question we need to ask.
I get the sense that you're saying that yes, we need more research into this topic of Caricom, but your own personal feelings and from your own years of experience, has the model or does the model need tweaking?
I can't use my own personal experience because I'm sitting here as a High Commissioner of Jamaica to Trinidad, and we have to separate the two roles. I'm coming from this as my earlier answer to your questions as a development specialist. Yes, this is what is right now, and we need that analysis.
Let me ask it in this way then. You mentioned Brexit, and on both sides of the divide, we have a nationalistic approach, those who are pushing nationalism across the world, and then you have those who are adamant that multilateralism is the way to go. Mm-hmm. Your personal thoughts on this fight between multilateralism and nationalism that is sweeping across the globe?
As an individual, I will always lean to nationalism first. But what I'm trying to say is the region has to look at its own specific issues to make a decision as to what's best for each country within that region. So while as an individual, as a human being, I tend to lean towards nationalism, it may not be what is best for the region. And no one can answer that question until a proper analysis has been done as to what works best for this region.
Up next, is Caricom business friendly?
Too much? I always think bureaucracy is too much.
Would you go as far as saying if that analysis, that self-introspection, I would call it,
yes,
from Caricom leadership, just to be a little bit more lean, we look at ourselves, where we've been over the last 50 years, where we need to get at. If that self-introspection and that research isn't done and we find out exactly where we're at and where we need to be, what do you fear will become of Caricom?
I don't know, because I will never try to predict what the numbers will show when the research is done. I honestly don't know, because there has not been enough introspection, as you call it, for us to have that idea.
Is it on the right trajectory then?
Caricom?
Caricom.
I don't know. You know why? Caricom operates in two ways. Caricom operates where the leaders of the country put forward what they think is best, yes? And then on the other side, there's the operational side of Caricom. The question to be asked is, are those two arms meeting as one? And again, we need research to know that.
And when you look at the development of the CARICOM region, it sort of answers itself. A lot of these countries are lagging behind digitally, it's lagging behind in other sectors of its society. So without research, I'm saying that there is clear evidence on the ground that there is so much work still to be done that it shows that we are already lagging behind parts of the world 50 years on.
Question I ask you though, is that CARICOM's fault? That's the question that we need to answer. Is it CARICOM's fault why that is happening? In Jamaica, for example, we are not lagging behind. We are, in the Prime Minister Holness's speech to Parliament, the opening of the budget presentation earlier this year, he spoke about digitization. And we are putting in STEM schools in Jamaica. The work is being done. So we don't feel as a country that we're left behind. The question has to be asked of the countries that feel they're left behind. Why are they feeling that way? Is it CARICOM or is it something else? We don't know. And that is why I'm saying until we do the legwork of the research, it's all speculation.
I do want to get to another point very quickly because it's an important point, usually that we don't often touch on in these interviews, but it's important when you're speaking to the Jamaican High Commissioner. Sport in Jamaica is an absolute driver of the country's brand, of the country's different sectors of society, perhaps not in, probably doesn't contribute largely to the GDP, but it's a huge driver within the country itself. And there are other countries within the region, there are other countries within the Western Hemisphere that is particularly looking towards its athletics program, to its athletes in Jamaica. How can a country like Jamaica really aid sports across the region? And let's just say, take an example, not just athletics, but its sporting program. West Indies cricket hasn't been doing that great of recent, but how can a country like Jamaica with such a rich sporting history, rich sporting legacy, and rich sporting culture at present really aid in lifting the entire Caribbean?
What broad shoulders you want us to have as Jamaica? But we're always open to a challenge. To be honest, I think what every country that looks at the Jamaican model needs to understand, it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's what sports success is all about. Back in the day, Jamaican athletes trained abroad. Today, most of our top athletes train right at home because we have taken the time individuals have taken the time to develop the skills. And our sporting program, as I said, start from your 6, 7 years old. So when a Jamaican athlete gets on the world stage, they're not frightened by the crowds. They're psychologically confident in themselves because they've been doing this. One of the toughest places for either our footballers, our netballers, our athletes to perform is the national stadium. Because Jamaicans, we are an audience, we love you, but we will also hate you, all in the span of 10 minutes. And so most of our athletes get this experience by performing in Jamaica because we provide so many opportunities for them to ensure that they play at home, that they perform at home. So when they go on the global stage, we're ready for the world. And that's part of the thing that persons have to understand. Also, sports can't just be something that you casually do as a government. It has to be wrapped into your national vision for yourself. And that's what Jamaica does. There is no Jamaica without sports. Who are we without that?
In wrapping up, your legacy as High Commissioner, you're here 1 month and you'll be here perhaps for a few years. Where would you like to leave bilateral relations for Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica by the end of your time here?
I want to continue on the work that has started to ensure that, one, our relationships remain strong and healthy. the diasporans in Trinidad and the rest of the region understand that Jamaica is there for them and that they feel welcomed in the Caribbean islands as we welcome other persons into our country. And, you know, MSMEs need to feel as though they can do business in the region. Not only look north of Jamaica, but they also need to look south of Jamaica because there are opportunities there. I do think also that at the end of my 4 years here, we should be able to say Jamaica and Jamaicans have benefited. And we should say that Trinidad and Tobago was proud to have hosted us and to help us and to assist us to that place where Jamaica wants to be.
I mean, you mentioned MSMEs, and I think it's a really important point. Have we done, that's what, I mean, you and I had a little bit of a back and forth between Caricom, but, you know, is the region, and let's just say in particular, you know, intergovernmental partnerships like the one that Kingston and Port of Spain has, is it smooth and easy enough for businesses in both sides, both countries, people on both sides to interconnect and do business and to open businesses?
There is much room for improvement. And for us, at the moment, the balance of trades, it's imbalanced. And we have to balance it out a little bit more. And MSMEs, those set of business people want to get into the Trinidad market.
What is holding them back? What is blocking it?
There are things that are in place. One, it's an understanding of how to operate here. And two is they're afraid, as they are, because remember, we're used to looking to the north. So it's a new frontier for a lot of business persons. And what we'll be doing is helping them to understand it may be a new frontier, but it is a good frontier for you to try and tackle.
Do you think also that the bureaucracy of doing business on the southern side might be a little bit too much for MSMEs?
Too much? I always think bureaucracy is too much. Always. I don't think the bureaucracy is any more than it is in other places. It's just that it's not done on an everyday basis as much as it is done elsewhere. So it seems harder. And there are non-tariff barriers. There might be. But again, we have to spend the time, understand it, and put it in a way that our diaspora persons and persons in Jamaica can understand and work towards as much as possible. The same way our countries and the countries in the region and the countries in the Pacific are working together now on climate change issues. Because as I said, we're surrounded by water, or we have water on most of our borders. It's the same way. You just have to find that connection to make it work right.
High Commissioner Campbell-Rodriques, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.